Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back. It is the post All-Star Game celebration of basketball. I'm here with Cody, and they did it. I can't believe they did it, but for the first time in like 25 years, I watched every possession of the All-Star Game, and I had to rewound what I missed because it was so entertaining and exhilarating, and it was like a 1990s All-Star Game. It was amazing.
So I'm going to backtrack and say NBA All-Star Saturday night. I'm going to start there for a second, but we're going to get to the All-Star Game.
Backtrack. We're only 30 seconds into the show.
Yeah, exactly. We're backtracking to, I guess technically everything's a backtrack if you really think about it. But All-Star Saturday this year is the first time since I think 2007, maybe 2008, that I didn't sit down and watch it live. Part of it was that I didn't realize it was starting in the middle of my day. Like I sat down and it was like 8 p.m. and I'm like, oh, it's usually like 8 to 10. So I'm going to fire it up. And I look on YouTube and it's like highlights from the 3-point contest. I'm like, wait a second, it happened? Like, is somebody beaming this from the future? What's going on? So I didn't see it live. I watched it as highlights and I was like, meh, whatever. And guess what, Ben? I planned on skipping the All-Star Game. Guess who reached out and was like, Cody, All-Star Game kind of rocks. You know who that person was?
Did I do that?
That was you.
Oh, wow.
That was you.
Okay.
So I watched, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a great All-Star Game. So I think that's the place to start. Let's celebrate. Let's start on a happy note, Ben.
This actually just made my entire week. Hearing this news, knowing that I could imbue that joy into your life. We don't even need to do the show anymore. I feel completely accomplished, and I absolutely loved that it was not only at 5 o'clock Eastern, but 2 o'clock Pacific, where I lived, which means I can fit that in before my warm milk and early to bed. Like that was fantastic. I don't have to stay up until 10 o'clock at night to watch the festivities. And it was on NBC, and I kind of liked the whole feel of like the afternoon sporting event. I don't know. It had a real old school vibe that I really enjoyed.
There was something to every year I got together with a group of friends and we would watch the All-Star stuff. And then it'd be like 10 p.m. and then you're a high school. They're sort of like, let's fire up 2 more movies after this. But it was like a natural end cap to like sitting around and watching stuff on TV. So it just threw me for a loop, the fact that it was earlier in the day.
I get it. You're a busy guy.
You were there. Am I allowed to? This isn't calling you out. That's why I hesitated at the end there. Can you report on how All-Star Saturday was?
Well, I went to Saturday, and I misjudged. I had to pick a day, and I mean, I didn't have to pick a day. I could have gone to both, but I was like, who wants to go to the All-Star Game? It's horrendous. Yeah. And the joke was on me because the All-Star Game was fantastic. It was a little strange in that I think there were more people in the concourse of the arena than in the seats in the arena. It started really early. I think there were like 112 people in the seats, but there was a lot of activity in the concourse. Cody. I walked in and oh my God, I was walking with Terry Porter and I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what to do. I was like, I'm like a child again. Terry Porter is here. This is unbelievable. Also, walked with Ralph Sampson for a little bit. Confirmed, not 7'4", just totally confirmed.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What do you think he's closer to? Like a 7'1",
7'2"? Yeah. I mean, we put this together from pictures over the years, but it's one of those things where when people are super duper tall, it's hard to gauge. But there are other really tall people there, like Zaza was standing. I'm telling you, there was a lot of activity in the concourse. I think people didn't even know the event had started, maybe. But yeah, Saturday, it was fun. It was nice.
I think my favorite part about All-Star Saturday is definitely not the dunk contest anymore. Like we could probably eject that to the moon. But I think my favorite part about the 3-point contest is really getting a look at what these guys look like when they're shooting. And I think the thing that stood out to me from watching it again on TV here, so it got zoomed in camera and stuff like that. Con Knippel's jumper is it's a little wonky. There's some stuff going on with the feet. There's some extra movement with the hands. Like the hands are almost like Reggie Miller-ish, where, I'm not going to judge Reggie Miller's jump shot because clearly it worked really well. And I'm not saying everyone has to have this perfect cookie cutter jump shot, but when I was watching him compared to people like Donovan Mitchell, who has quite the economy of motion when it comes to his jump shot, I was like, oh, wow, there's some edges that could be sanded off in terms of this jumper. I wonder if he actually has a level up he could go, or I just wonder if Khan's going to be one of these guys. I don't know why I'm going first name. If Knippel is going to be one of these guys that just kind of has a cool, funky looking jumper that works for him throughout his entire career. To me, that was the biggest takeaway of All-Star Saturday.
That's a great point. The shooting is incredible, and then the ability to kind of see it under a microscope. But I wasn't sure if it was changed slightly because when you're doing the contest, you have to have efficiency. You can't get tired, and you might not want to jump really high. And then, guys are trying to figure out, like, do I put the ball rack on my right hand, my right hip, or my left hip? So I couldn't figure it out. But it really stood out in person that Con has this little swivel in his footwork and things like that. Like you said, I don't know if that's something to actually be corrected or if it's just the motor patterns that he's developed over the years. Over the weekend, I asked, since we're just talking about all the fun guys I ran into, I was talking to Rip Hamilton about shooting, and I said, we're talking about changing shooting form and things like that. And he said, Ben, the shooting form that works, that's the one you go with. Like, so in other words, if you look at Reggie, like if you've had it since you were a kid and it works for you, don't change it. With that said, the sort of commoditization of shooting in basketball is ridiculous. Like everyone having the same form. My wife actually made this observation watching the 3-point contest. She's like, they all have the same form. And we were watching an old game, and she's like, everybody has like this old wonky like personality in their shot form. You don't see that anymore. So maybe that's part of the improvement over the years, is regimenting the way players shoot.
No, it was fun. Even in, like, let's say 2007, you throw on like a Suns Nuggets game. You got like Marcus Camby over here taking a jump shot. Sean Marion over here. Kenyon Martin's taking the jump shot over here. Just lots of different things that you can see with those particular jumpers. I gotta ask. Slight Jim Corner situation here. Does Rip Hamilton still look like a guy that could like run 10 miles at like a 5-minute pace? I messed that up there. I can't talk.
He can run under a 5-minute pace. Yes. Okay. And I assume he can still do it. I don't know if he runs as much as he used to, but he looks like he could. So there's one more thing we have to get to with this all-star shenanigans. Okay. Mm-hmm. For a long time, I think years ago on a podcast, I may have proposed this, have wanted a one-on-one tournament. Mm-hmm. And the women are now doing the one-on-one tournament with some wonderful rules. They have a 7-second shot clock. I don't know if the men would use a 6 or a 5 or things like that. I also don't know if the physicality and some of the dynamics would change the way you want to set up the court. I was thinking maybe you wouldn't have a 3-point line. Maybe you would. I don't know. But the women have these rules, and they're great. And the one-on-one tournament that they run, I mean, it's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. And you can see how the NBA, to create this allure around the one-on-one tournament, especially for these guys who get fans so excited about their one-on-one play, then they turn on the Thinking Basketball podcast and we're like, they're not that good. They're really good one-on-one, but do they really know how to set a back screen and box out on the baseline? I don't think so. Plus minus going downhill. It's like, this would be such a great event to, I think, activate that type of fan engagement and competitiveness among the players and things like that. So that would be my absolute must change. Get rid of the dunk contest, send it to the moon. The guys on the moon base can figure out what to do with it with less gravity. And down here, we can have a one-on-one tournament.
I mean, the thing that was so great about the women's one-on-one tournament is it's some of the biggest names that are in the league for them. Right? Like you get Paige Beckers out there. You got Chelsea Gray. You got Kelsey Plum. Kelsey Plum just cooking people. Like it's unbelievable watching some of these people. And basketball is of course a game of youth. Like I think we proved that over and over that you want to have the spryness and athleticism and things like that. But you see somebody like Chelsea Gray just cooking Paige Beckers because she has like this wily sort of strength and knows how to use her positioning and body and things like that. It's really cool to see how it might not be as simple as being like, oh, this person's first step's better. Oh, this person's pull up mid-range jumper is better and things like that. And I think it would be a great opportunity for NBA players that might not stand out, like you said, in a traditional all-star game to get out there and show what they can do. Like, do you think that I don't want to see Jalen Green try and showcase that he thinks he's the best one-on-one player in the NBA? Like that would be incredible stuff. But then of course I still want to see like, what does Devin Booker look like out there? Can Kevin Durant be defended, right? LeBron James, he's just going to back somebody down and be an old man sort of thing. I think it would just be stylistically fascinating to see. And unlike the dunk contest where it feels like you've kind of maxed out everything that there is to see from an NBA player, I just think every year you can see, sort of new maneuvers that these guys are going to pull off. So I think that was like a test case that we should really be pushing for a one-on-one tournament at NBA All-Star Weekend.
part of the allure of the dunk contest and what made it the dunk contest was the star players going up against each other. It was Michael Jordan and Dominique Wilkins and Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady and Steve Francis. And these were big time players in the league participating in the dunk contest. And the thing that I love about the idea of the one-on-one tournament is it would allow the very, very, very best players, the stars of the stars, to kind of bone up in a very specific competitive environment that we could bring back. The dunk contest, as it lost its luster, one thing that happened is we had professional dunkers on the side. And it turns out the dunk isn't that interesting because the professional dunkers aren't like, selling out the Staples Center every year. And then even with something like Levine and Gordon about a decade ago having that unbelievable dunk contest, there's still sort of, I think, more intrigue when you can activate the stars and the faces of the sport. And I think that would be the really fun part of a one-on-one tournament. And is it going to be, Wemby? Is it going to be Jokic? Are they going to be backing people down? This is where the rules get kind of fun, the shot clocks. And I mean, if you haven't seen this, the women have a rule where you can have an unlimited amount of fouls, but if you foul 2 possessions in a row, then it's a free throw, stuff like that. So if you foul the possession before, then you're like, oh man, I can't foul on this, things of that nature. So yeah, that's probably my big takeaways from the All-Star weekend here in LA.
Like you said, with the dunk maybe not having as much allure as you might think. Like I still remember like the and one leagues and stuff like that, where air up there throwing down a 720 dunk. I remember it like it was yesterday, being like, this is the pinnacle of human athleticism, right? And that was back when like you have dial up YouTube and it takes you an hour to load up like a minute long video. You're just waiting. You're like, there's no way this is a real 720 dunk. And it is, like the guy like pulls it off. But again, that wasn't even in a contest. That was in a game. So I think there's something more exciting about the dunk. Like you said, when there's stars going against each other, when the best of the best are out there. And B, I just think dunks are cooler when they're in the game. Like I would much rather see some of the coolest dunks like in the context of an actual basketball game. Vince Carter jumping over Frederick Weiss in the Olympics in 2000, right? Michael Jordan doing the Smitty before coming down and throwing it down, and Patrick Ewing, right? Things like that to me are just cooler than what can be pulled off in a dunk contest.
Okay, today we are going to discuss, we have the second half of the season, the quote-unquote second half. It's really the final trimester of the season. It's the stretch run. It's this period from February to April where teams are getting in position for the playoffs, and, there's all kinds of tanking going on, and, maybe we can talk about that later if you want. I know you wrote an essay and then sent it to ChatGPT so he could make it better. So we have to sort out all these trades and all this movement that took place last week at the deadline. And unless I'm mistaken something, Cody, we had like one blockbuster trade. We had like one high level player trade for now. Yes, Jaren Jackson was moved, but that's for next year and down the road, blah, blah, blah. But like one team, Cleveland and the Clippers, had a trade. And then all the other moves were about the depth, the bench, the margins, the filling out the rotation. I don't think there's a single starter, unless I'm missing something, that was traded among the top teams outside of the Cleveland and Clippers swap of point guards. So we can start there. We can go wherever. But, when I sized it up and was thinking like, what does this mean? Is this normal? Do we normally have just 8th men being traded? How important are these players for certain teams to get depth in their rotation? That's what we can. Did anything change? Did anyone change their title odds at the trade deadline? And I think the easy place to start is Cleveland and the Clippers, but after that, it gets harder.
I think the Cavaliers have to have changed their position, right? Like Darius Garland, whatever you think about him at his peak for impact, he just wasn't playing. And we hadn't seen Darius Garland playing at his peak in the playoffs for a couple of seasons now. So whatever you might want to say about James Harden, like he's pretty sturdy. I know after like 2020 and something like that, 2021 or so, he starts having some hamstring injuries. Of course, all these guys, once they get on the wrong side of 30, things just start to happen a little bit more. But before that, like he's an Iron Man. He's built like a guy that can take a lot of physicality. And in the playoffs, like the physicality can kind of work for him. Obviously, he has turnover issues. He has stinky games, things like that. But at the end of the day, Harden can still be Harden. So I think even watching like a little bit before All-Star break to see how Harden fits in, I don't know if anything shocked me. I think it kind of looked like how I expected. I forget which game it was. Was it the Nuggets when they were down by 10 or so, I think, in the fourth quarter. Tight game. The other team has a lead for quite a bit. And then the Cavaliers are just able to go on this run. They kind of have this your turn, my turn sort of situation. Mitchell is just showing off how he is still just the star of the team. But then Harden hitting clutch threes, getting into the paint, having this pick and roll chemistry with Jarrett Allen just off the bat. I don't know. I think he's going to fit in about as well as you would imagine. It doesn't seem like he thinks he's going to be the offensive system now, because I think Donovan Mitchell very clearly is just a better player at this point. So I'm pretty excited about this move for Cleveland.
So where do you think it puts Cleveland in the Eastern hierarchy, though? I mean, I think that's the big picture question, right? Does this make them the favorite? How does it change their matchup against Detroit or Boston or New York?
Okay, so Detroit, I mean, like we talked about with Detroit, you have the couple of non-shooters, you have most of the offense coming from Cade. All of a sudden, Cleveland, you get into the playoffs, you have a couple of high-end offensive players that can do stuff, right? Like you're not just going to siphon all of your offensive ability into one dude. And I think that is so important when you get to the playoffs. So, man, I don't know what my tiers are off the top of my head, but
well,
I mean,
can we add something?
Yeah.
With Cleveland, they also added Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder, basically for DeAndre Hunter. That was essentially that move. So Darius Garland, who has been injured a lot, is gone. DeAndre Hunter, who has been injured a lot or not playing that well, also gone. And then these short-term moves for the playoffs this year with an open Eastern Conference is not just Harden, it's also Keon Ellis and Schroeder to shore up that rotation and create more on-ball punch. So factor that into, what you're about to say.
Can I say this is obviously in theory. Like, we have to see how it's all going to turn out. We have to see how it looks a couple of weeks from now when we get to the playoffs and stuff. In theory, this move might move Cleveland to the top of whatever Eastern Conference tier that I have. Like, if you stack up Cleveland right now, in theory, on paper, how I'm imagining these guys, I wouldn't be shocked to see them make their way through 3 rounds of the Eastern Conference.
Oh, okay. I like that. So with the Cavs last year, they had this great regular season offense, right? This year, we have not seen such a regular season offense from them. They are what overall in the season? They are 7th in offensive rating, which is solid. It's a couple points better than league average. But last year, they were like 6-7 points better than league average or something for most of the season. So all that is to say, their offense is still technically a little bit better than their defense. Do you think this move gives them a really good offense, either for the rest of the year or in these playoff matchups? Do you think this move allows them to put defenders around these two guards? Does having Harden be a bigger guard and being able to play more closer to the basket, I should say, or against bigger players and kind of hold his own? You don't have a great agility on the perimeter with Harden, but he's stronger, he's bigger. We already saw that in the Denver game you referenced last year. So what exactly do you think it is? Or do you think it's just specific to a matchup where you say, all right, if we get the Pistons in a playoff series, now I might have more firepower than them. Now I might have more weapons where I can switch hunt players or something like that. I don't know how fun it's going to be to switch hunt against the Pistons what we saw last year is you're constantly trying to put bring Jalen Duren, the big center, up in action, get him away from the basket, and the Pistons are trying to work around that game. So, I said a lot there, but is there a specific thing that jumps out to you about the Cavs when you have this very spicy Hodak take here on February 16th that maybe the Cavs are the new front runners in the Eastern Conference?
Well, I think a big thing that works is my biggest criticism of the Cavaliers a couple of weeks ago, whenever we were talking about them last year, is that they or not last year, recently, I should say, is we talked about the MFer line, Ben, and that Detroit probably crossed it. And I thought that in opposition, Cleveland didn't quite have enough of that, especially from the role players. Like, not a lot of I'm going out there, I'm going to mess things up sort of energy from the role guys.
Yes.
But now I think having somebody like James Harden, especially being able to have his own minutes or even sharing minutes with Mitchell, you can have role players kind of form themselves into some molds a little bit more when they're on the court. Like, it takes a lot off their plate compared to what was happening. It takes a lot off Evan Mobley's plate offensively. We talked about, I think, in the Sub All-Star podcast, how when he's on the court without Donovan Mitchell, yeah, his scoring goes up, the efficiency drops pretty significantly, and their offense doesn't look great. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was like 108 or something like that. That sort of stuff can start being erased. So I think it lowers the burden for basically everybody else that's a role player. And then guys like Keon Ellis, like last year when I watched more of the Kings, I liked Keon Ellis. I think he's an interesting defender. I think he's a really interesting role player. And I was sad that he was kind of, mired in the nonsense that happens in Sacramento year in and year out. So I don't want to like make any big proclamations because of Keon Ellis, but he's at least interesting. Right. And I think he at least can bring some of this energy that Cleveland was missing, and having offensive guys that can set him up a little bit more and make sure that he doesn't have to do more. It's only going to help his development even more. So I think at the end of the day, that is what makes me a lot more confident about the Cavaliers.
Okay. And they're going to get Max Strus back in theory as well.
Maybe at some point.
Yeah. I mean, the report is, he should have been back at this point. We'll see now that the All-Star break. Sometimes when you're like close to the All-Star break, they don't want to bring you back a game before the All-Star break. And when they're fully healthy now, I guess where I'm at with them is the question of whether we just think they're flat out better than the other teams because of everything you just said, or is there still a specific matchup where you look at their style of play? Because last year, really, for me, the fact that the Pacers were there, I mean, the Celtics, I think, also could have been very tough for them. But the Pacers were also like, you don't want two landmines on your way through your side of the conference bracket. You want to maybe one, and then you can fade it. But two is a little bit trickier. And with Cleveland now, I think I'm feeling pretty good about Boston. So Boston made a trade at the deadline, Cody, and they made one of these financial trades. You know what I'm talking about?
Financial trade. What
financial
do you mean by
trade.
financial trade?
Yeah, that's what I mean. You don't know where you look at it and you're like, why are they doing this trade? And then there's actually some accountant in the background, and he's like, this trade gets them below the luxury tax, which, to be fair to both the teams and the league, the luxury tax is not simply punitive from a dollar amount. It actually restricts the kind of moves you can make. So there is a strategic element to getting below the tax line. But I thought that the way the Celtics are constructed right now, having Anthony Simons as another ball handler who can initiate and create his own shot a little bit was critical. So much so to the point where after the trade, Joe Mazzulla moved Peyton Pritchard back to the bench to try to balance the little sort of offensive initiation that they have, right, between the starters and the bench. So we'll see what happens if Jason Tatum comes back and what he looks like. But I thought that was a downgrade and potentially a significant one, because I don't know what you're going to do with Vooch in the playoffs from a defensive perspective. So to me, in my head, it's like all of a sudden I'm feeling really good about Cleveland, Boston as a matchup possibly. And then we can worry about New York, Detroit. I don't want to say this too loudly, but Detroit almost beat New York last year. That was an extremely close and competitive series. And I think, if anything, the Pistons have continued to improve this season, as we've talked about throughout the course of the year.
So we can talk about like the specific matchup stuff with the Cavaliers here too. So maybe we circle back and talk about some of these top Eastern Conference teams once we talk about a couple of these trades. Not that the other teams really did anything, but I think placing this Vucevic trade into context will help a little bit with that. Listening to other pods, consuming some other content and stuff like that, and obviously by the way they play, Mazzulla is obsessed with spacing out the court, right? So yes, there's obviously a financial aspect to it, but I think Mazzulla really likes the idea of having more big men that are comfortable and probably much more preferable to playing out in the perimeter, making some passes out there to allow some of the more open court concepts he's doing. Like already Vucevic feels really, really comfortable in some of their horn sets and some of their double staggers and stuff like that. Something that really stood out to me and an energy I haven't seen from them is Vucevic is really good at feeling when he has somebody that's a mismatch, diving into the paint. And you know who he has a good synergy with so far? Derek White. Like whenever he has a little opening down there, like any kind of passing opening, Derek White's like, hey, great, a guy that's going to post up and make a couple hooks. I'm going to take advantage of this. And I thought they had some nice back and forths a couple of times.
Yeah, just to be fair, I mean, I don't see him adding much spice to playoff matchups on the offensive end, and they're the second best offensive team in the league. So I'm not a fan of it. So
I do wonder in terms of
Jason
Tatum coming back too, right? Like this is a guy that handles a lot. He has a bigger offensive load and things like that. So maybe there was almost a calculation that's like, we don't necessarily need somebody like Anthony Simons being somebody that's going to be leading a lot of creation. Once we have Tatum back, like we have Pritchard, we have White, we have Brown, we have Tatum. We need to get a little bit sturdier on with our big men, right? So maybe that was part of what's going on. And honestly, I think I hate the trade less than you do. I'm a little bit more curious about it, and maybe it's just because I'm still haunted by Vucevic hitting like threes against the drop Bucks defensive scheme in like 2020. And I think sometimes he can catch fire and do stuff like that. Obviously, you get further into the playoffs and he's going to be a lot more weak. But I don't know. It's not like Anthony Simons is a perfect player that's not going to be picked on as well defensively. So I think it's interesting enough, especially in the context of Jason Tatum seeming to be definitely coming back soon.
We'll agree to disagree. Vooch's teams have been better with him on the bench for 6 straight years, and I think a lot of that is defense. No, I'm just saying. I think they needed defense if they're going to make a change. And to me, if you have a weakness, just philosophically speaking, from a team building perspective, if you have a weakness in the backcourt defensively, Anthony Simons tried really hard, but he's not a great defender. So you got buy-in there. That is a lot easier to have an elite defense around than when your center is the defensive problem, because you lose rim protection, you lose a position that in theory is the most valuable defensive position on the court, and you're going to get hunted at that position, and it's harder to protect than just like, Anthony Simons is already guarding a guard. We're going to have to account for that to help anyway in those positions. So we will see what happens. Yes, go ahead.
This is interesting. I like this. So with Vucevic, if he's going to get minutes in the playoffs, like he's very clearly a defensive weakness there. If we look at the top 4 teams in the East right now, look at the Pistons, the Celtics, Knicks, and Cavaliers, post Harden, post Vucevic, things like that.
Whoa! What do you? Charlotte Hornets erasure is taking place right now.
I said the top 4. They're not in the top 4.
You mean you didn't mean the 4 best teams. You meant the 4 best teams by standing.
9th seed. They have a little bit to go here before this possible honeymoon is over. Although a Hornets Detroit series might just be, I mean, that should be on like ESPN, the front in NBC, whatever else they need to be broadcasting here. What do you think the biggest weakness is for each of those 4 teams, and which weakness is the most schemable when you get into a playoff series?
Okay, so I think if we start with the Pistons, they're the 1 seed, it's shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a perfect segue into what they did at the deadline. They traded Jaden Ivey basically for Kevin Huerter. And I don't know if Kevin Huerter has demonstrated the ability to consistently play at the level that he hit when he was at his best in 2023 in Sacramento, when they finished with the 3 seed and had a great regular season. Mike Brown was there. I'm not sure Huerter still has that. I'm also not sure that from a shooting standpoint, Huerter is quite as good of a shooter as kind of his reputation. Yes, you're saying, you're making a face like you have a stat queued up. Do you have a stat queued up?
I do. This has been my take about Huerter for years at this point. He is a better second side catch and creator than he is as a catch and shoot guy. If we go back, last 250 games that he's played, right? 250 regular season games. He's taking a shade under 11 3-point attempts per 100 possessions, 36% from 3, right? That's good. That's a great volume. And that's a solid 3-point percentage, but it is by no means a guy that you look at and be like, that is an absolute knockdown sniper that we're going to have to just completely break our defense to try and stop. Again, watching him in Atlanta those years, he was a lot more comfortable catching, breaking, not necessarily breaking down defense, but finding those driving gaps, kicking it out, creating for other guys. And I think that's going to help, but he on his own, he adds some shooting. He's not going to fix any shooting problems that the Pistons have.
Yeah, boy, technically Ivy has better shooting indicators when you look at open shots and catch and shoot shots and things like that over the last few years than Kevin Huerter does. So I'm not sure how much that moves the needle for me on the Pistons as well. And thus I do think the big thing with them is shooting. I'm fascinated in general by the idea of Duren and Asar being on the court together. We've talked about that a lot. It gives them a lot of magic on the offensive glass and sort of a lot of downhill paint pressure. And I do think there are avenues to success in the playoffs to continue, I would say, in a similar level that what we've seen from their regular season offense. If you look at their regular season offense, it's above average. It's about 2 points above league average on the entire year right now. It's a 117 offensive rating, and league average is around 115 or so on the 2026 season. So I think we'll still have some successful offense, but then you add Cade. And as much as we're digging Cade this year, I really love Cade this year and all the other stuff he's doing, but the outside shooting is not really a strength of his either. So you just have a lot of players on the Pistons that don't shoot. They get a lot of juice out of Duncan Robinson. They must have listened to our 25 greatest players of the 21st century series we did last summer and understand just one of these movement shooters can help create a lot of gravitational pull around the court, because they do get a lot of mileage out of Duncan in that setting. And Duncan Robinson's also done a good job holding up defensively, I think, in the last few seasons, or when he's been put in these situations, even going back to Miami. So it's the shooting for Detroit. Do you have one that jumps out for one of the other? I mean, I can do the Knicks easily, but do you have one for the do you have one for the Celtics or the Cavs that jump out to you?
Celtics are interesting, because I would have said before the Vucevic trade, which is interesting because I'm a little more excited about that, that they actually may have the least weaknesses of these four teams. But I just don't necessarily know if the high end of what they're able to do. They just kind of chug along with what they're doing. You watch I think we go back to a couple of weeks ago, they play Miami, right? They start the game shooting 1 for 20 from three. 1 for 20 in the first. It was they're down. They scored 30 something points in the first half. They're down by 21. They come back and win. They come back and win that game. It's really unbelievable. Derek White couldn't throw the ball into the ocean, and he's still out there looking like an unbelievable, the second best player out there. Jaylen Brown is just physically bullying himself to the basket, forcing it, making all these incredible self-creation types of shots. So the Celtics team just kind of chugs along, and they can trust in their defense in a way that they can completely just change the tide of a game, even being down 20 or something like that. So I really like the Celtics team in this conversation.
But to me, this is a magic that I haven't fully understood if it works in the playoffs yet. The Celtics have more "how did they win that game" wins this season than I think the rest of the league combined. There's just there's a game every week where you're like, they can't win this game. It's 51-36 at halftime. Peyton Pritchard can't get by his man. Derek White can't shoot the ball. Jaylen Brown isn't scoring 40. And then the Celtics come out in the second half and they score 77 points in the second half. And you're just like, I don't understand what's going on. So I do think what we're seeing in these games is reflective of this tension that exists with the Celtics between this incredible holistic offensive output that they're able to generate. By the way, at this point in time, with all of the negativity around the league over the years and all the complaining about the style of play and things like that, the Celtics just get labeled as this team that shoots a lot of threes. And I'm tired of it in the sense that it's like Steph Curry's just a shooter. It's the reason the Celtics shoot so many threes is because they have the most ridiculous shooters, the most ridiculous collection of shooters in the entire league. That's why they shoot so many threes. They have 6 or 7 volume 3-point shooters on their roster at all times. And historically, a lot of these guys can stretch to the 4-point line. When they had Porzingis, Pritchard, Porzingis, Sam Hauser, these are players that like to shoot from, they're allergic to the 3-point line. They're like, if I get within 5 feet of the 3-point line, I get uncomfortable. They're shooting from 30 feet every time. So there's this tension of this offense that is performing at such a high level because Joe Mazzulla is finding all these tactical edges around all this skill and shooting, versus when the game gets really grimy, we have one player that can do anything, and Jaylen Brown's not a great passer. And what happens if defenses load up on him and they can force turnovers? And Jaylen Brown's been incredible this year, but let's say 1.5. I think Pritchard has some of that in the right matchup as well. So that's where the Tatum wild card comes in. because we don't really know what type of player Tatum's going to be in his first year back from an injury like this. And that's where with Boston, I'm just like, their biggest weakness has got to be physical switching defenses that give that offensive style problems. And how do you get a basket when you're going to be asked to basically isolate and play one-on-one in those situations?
And it does feel like, especially going back to that Heat game, just because it's top of mind, the most recent one I watched, the huge comeback and things like that, when they couldn't get anything going, yes, it was Jaylen Brown creating a lot of this. The handle is improved, but he still uses so much of his physicality of just kind of bullying himself through people. And if we get to the playoffs and we get to this point where defenses are able to be more physical, we get to what we saw in the playoffs last year. I don't necessarily think that's going to be as effective as it was. And they just do not have the players. We talked about Derek White taking like 6% of his shots, like within 3 feet of the basket. They don't have a lot of guys that are going to make dents against the defense, driving into the paint and creating in that sort of way. So I think consistent, easy baskets is probably the biggest weakness for the Celtics team as currently constructed, without having any knowledge of what Jason Tatum is going to look like.
But it's also weird because the Pistons are the big physical defensive switching team in the East. And regardless of who's been injured or played, like the Celtics and the Pistons play really, really, really close competitive games every time they meet this year. Yep. So I'm not entirely sure how this applies to like a team like Cleveland, where now Boston is going to go, okay, we got Donovan Mitchell right there, and we have James Harden right there, and we want to figure out how to attack those players and move the pieces around, or if they have the double bigs, how are we going to defend if you're going to put both Mobley and Allen on the court? How are we going to defend the spacing of that where we don't necessarily need to stretch out to either of those big men defensively? It's not obvious how this shakes out, because Cleveland, I do think, is going to have way more offensive punch with James Harden. And then there's always the questions about James Harden's consistency or stamina in the playoffs, depending on how you want to look at it. And then we haven't gotten to the Knicks. And in a way, the Knicks might have the most quote unquote playoff talent. Those top 4 players that they have were all in our sub all-stars last year. And they have just shown for a while that those guys, like, you go to a war, like if the basketball game is a war and bodies are flying and it's crazy, people are getting ejected and crazy stuff is happening, you want Jalen Brunson on your team, you want OG Anunoby on your team, and you probably want Mikal Bridges on your team. And hey, Josh Hart's going to thrive in a game like that as well. So the Knicks' obvious weakness is defense and the pick and roll defense with those two guys being on the court. I don't think that's a problem that they've solved entirely, but also, Cody, heck, do you have thoughts on the Knicks losing like 9 of 11 and falling apart and then turning around and winning like whatever? Just, hey, whoa, we might be the best team in the month of February or something like that.
I do have to say the Knicks are underperforming what I would have expected for the regular season this year, right? And there's definitely seems to be stuff under the hood that I don't necessarily want to talk about. In terms of what you're talking about, though, like, yeah, when you have your 1 and your 5 or 4, whatever Towns is playing at the time, being significant issues defensively, especially in the pick and roll, that's going to cause major issues. And I know the Pistons play them well, and they were on their way to winning that series last year, right? But even though Cade is a tremendous offensive player, like we talked about the scoring woes, the efficiency isn't there, and it's not like he has partners with that he's going to absolutely eviscerate them in the pick and roll. So I don't know if the Pistons are able to really take advantage of some of the weaknesses the Knicks have. Again, the aforementioned stuff we just talked about, the Celtics, I don't know if they necessarily... I guess with a lot of movement concepts, you can get Towns maybe confused a little bit, Brunson getting caught on some screens and stuff like that. So maybe not through traditional pick and rolls, but I think in a lot of movement concepts, the Celtics could certainly cause some problems for the Knicks. But Cleveland, you have Donovan Mitchell and James Harden out there. I don't know. That is a ton in terms of matchup hunting, in terms of moving the ball around and finding exactly what you're looking for. I mean, if I'm a New York fan, I'm kind of nervous. I would be really nervous about going against this new look Cavaliers right now.
Can I ask you something to go back to our All-Star conversation? Is Karl Anthony Towns the first player ever to be chewed out for making a terrible rotation in an All-Star game in a critically competitive moment? Does Victor Wembanyama, does he deserve all the credit for the intensity of the All-Star game on Sunday? And you saw this, right? At the end of the game.
Yes.
And okay, on one hand, I was like, it's an all-star game and it's one play. But on the other hand, I was like, oh my God, this is what Knicks fans are concerned about in the playoffs, because you want to understand context and time and score. And as we've talked about lately, the sort of intellectual space of the game is becoming more and more important. When I look at young prospects, I'm really, really focused on how their feel of the game works, what they're thinking about, how they talk about plays. They're seeing the game as 9 or even 10 pieces, including themselves, move around. They understand what their coaches want. They're communicating a lot on both ends of the court. And if you didn't see it, it was the end of the first game the international team played, and there's a drive into the paint, and Victor Wembanyama is guarding the drive. I don't think this can be overstated. Victor Wembanyama is standing there, and what happens when players go near Victor Wembanyama? They don't shoot. But Karl Anthony Towns is like, I'm going to help 20 feet off of a three-point shooter in a situation where only a three-point shot could hurt the team. They could give up a 2. Yeah, it was not good, portending exactly what you're talking about for the playoffs.
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, they're in overtime. So the overtime rules for the All-Star game is the first team to get to 5, right?
Exactly.
So the team that they were playing,
it was 4-2. It was 4-2.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, they're playing the youngins.
The youngins needed to hit a 3, and if they made a 2, right, they still would have had a chance to win the game on the other end. And I think it's Scotty Barnes that Karl Anthony Towns helps off, right? And maybe in general, it would make sense to help off in that situation. But like you said, they could give up the 2, right? And then they could go back and try and win on the other end. And there is no exaggerating. I have never seen somebody as angry as Victor Wembanyama was during an All-Star game. He was furious with Karl Anthony Towns during that. And I think the best part about the whole thing is Barnes didn't even realize he hit the game winner.
Didn't know they won the game.
He started running back, and a teammate came out and started hugging him, and he's like, and he holds his hands out.
I legit think that he would have not shot it if he knew it was for the game, because he's Scotty Barnes. Yeah. And he just shot it in the flow of the game because he was wide open, which makes the entire thing that much more epic. Can we go down this? Can we go down this rabbit hole? Can we talk about the All-Star game for a couple of minutes and then return to the Eastern Conference? Am I missing?
No, we talked about All-Star Saturday. We didn't talk about the All-Star game at all.
What?
Nothing. We didn't say anything about it. Nothing.
Okay. I need to retire. My brain is fried. I could have sworn we had a whole conversation about that. I've talked to too many people about this All-Star game. Yes.
Can you tell me what are some of the most interesting things that you saw? Like you hit us right here with that great observation with Towns being chewed out by Wemby at the end of game 1. What are some other, like, here are my main talking points about certain players walking away from the All-Star games? I guess I should say, pluralize it.
Well, they actually ran sets, and then the players played decently hard during those sets. And that as a framework was just so much better than like street ball or whatever they were doing for the last 10 years. I have no idea what they were doing for the last 10 years, where no one's in a defensive stance and there aren't really many screens or things like that. So that gave the game structure. And then the players in some of those situations really wanted to stop their rivals. And that led to like actually requiring tough shot making at times, actually requiring skill or reading a slip on the back line if you're setting a screen and there's a switch or something like that. And then we got this insane performance where Kawhi Leonard scores 31 points in a quarter. Kawhi Leonard scored 31 points in a quarter. And like, this is the simplest way I can describe it as someone who has seen many old All-Star games that used to be good and stopped watching them a few years ago. They were all earned. All the points were earned. So when you see players like, oh, he was MVP of the All-Star game, he had 40 points. Usually it's just silly dunks and wide open shots. Like Kawhi Leonard scored 31 points of game shots against other All-Stars. They were all game level shots.
Yeah.
That's the simplest way I think I can describe it.
Yeah, that was an unbelievable heater. And you could just tell that his teammates were like, just go out there, just cook, like keep it going. I want to give a major shout out. So in honor of the smartest plays video that you put out for the NBA recently, I'm going to give Donovan Mitchell a shout out here. I forgot which game it was, either the first or second one, right? And it's the old guys playing. It's the old U.S. stars, right? It's got LeBron, Durant, and stuff are on that team. And they need to hit this shot to win the game, right? I think they're down by 1. They're going to lose if they don't make the shot. And it's like, oh, who's going to take it? Is it going to be LeBron? I think Reggie Miller's like, give it to Durant. He's going to take the shot, right? So there's some kind of action over here on the wing. Donovan Mitchell on the opposite wing makes his perfect 45 cut. Perfect 45 cut. He knows he's not necessarily going to get the ball. I think LeBron sees him cutting in. Mitchell catches it cutting into the paint. Immediately, he knows he's cutting because he's going to hit Fox on the weak side for the jumper. So he catches it, immediately swings it to Fox, pump fake, one step, game winner, right? And as soon as I saw that, yeah, great shot by Fox. That was amazing. But that cut by Donovan Mitchell was absolutely brilliant. And I'm like, wow, I don't remember seeing stuff like that in an all-star game before. I think that was the most exciting, maybe the most excited I was all of last night was seeing that cut from Mitchell.
That's what I'm saying. It was real basketball. It wasn't 110%, which it doesn't need to be, but you had like plays and structures and cuts and reads. And it was, we seriously didn't talk about this yet.
We didn't say a word about the all-star game.
Wow. I thought I started the show and was talking about this. And
we talked about All-Star Saturday a lot. You know who tried really hard on defense to bring us back to the Eastern Conference? Mr. Cade Cunningham. I mean, that guy, I don't necessarily know what his stocks actually were, but he was blocking shots at the rim. He was disrupting stuff on the perimeter. He was just the cool, calm, collected guy that we've seen all year. Like my Cade stock rose just from the All-Star game. I'm watching him like this is amazing. This is the energy that he's going to bring to literally the All-Star game. I can't wait to see him again in the playoffs this year. So I don't know, man. I'm riding and dying with Cade Cunningham right now. I couldn't be more excited about this dude in general.
If I'm a Pistons fan, have we reached the point of the show where we can just start flinging hot takes?
Oh, please. Yes.
If I'm a Pistons fan, I pray that this guy is not traded or lost in free agency in the next decade because he's going to win a title. He just he just has that.
Yeah.
He just has that. Yeah.
Especially for a guy that, he's won like 3 playoff games in his career.
I don't know where it comes from. It's fascinating. That's why I love it so much.
It's unbelievable. He's got it. He's like, okay, I got a sense for this last year against the Knicks. Like I'm ready to go again. So in terms of all of this that we just talked about, do you see clear separation between these top 4 teams in the East, or do you think there's a dark horse in the East that has a better chance than any one of those 4 to make their way to the finals?
Well, I will be honest, since the All-Star break just transpired, I cannot remember who the other 11 teams in the Eastern Conference are. Let's see. No, I don't think there's a dark horse. And among these 4 teams, I do not see clear separation. Okay. I don't. I do think the matchups are going to be really interesting. The thing is, I kind of like the Pistons. I'm getting more. You're selling me more on the Pistons here in some of these matchups. But Tatum is a massive wild card, and yeah, and then we'll see how good Cleveland's on. Well, Cleveland hasn't been healthy. So
the Knicks are just so weird to me because, like you said, like high-end stuff that they can do. Like we know Jalen Brunson is a wizard, right? The spacing Towns brings, like both Bridges and OG Anunoby were sub-all-stars for us, right? Like this is a very good basketball team that can do a lot of different stuff, can come at you from a bunch of different angles. Yeah, they have some issues defensively, but they also have some really strong suits defensively, right? They also have guys like Mitchell Robinson that can just muck up a game with his offensive rebounding. So I want to point to the Knicks and be like, I could see them being knocked out in what some might consider a shocking upset pretty easily, but I can also, on the other side, see them getting their way to the finals still, right? So I think there's quite a variance for the Knicks, whereas like I feel more confident in what I'm going to see from somebody like the Pistons. So as of right now, this isn't very hot. Sorry, I can't come in blazing, but those 4 are just in their own Eastern Conference category to me.
Okay. Would you like to give any thoughts on any other? We have the Western Conference trades, but the Western Conference trades were all about the bench. So I'll give you Charlotte in the East did add Kobe White for Colin Sexton and a couple second-round picks for their backup point guard. But in the West, we should also say the Knicks did add Jose Alvarado. I think he'll play in the playoffs. Yeah,
that is interesting.
Yeah. I think he'll have at least one Grand Theft Alvarado in the playoffs, don't you? And Madison Square Garden will go crazy. And if the game's on ESPN, they'll be like, oh my God, Jose Alvarado, he's from New York City, which is fun. Okay, so Minnesota adds Ayo Dosunmu for a bunch of second-round picks and Rob Dillingham. the Thunder pick up Jared McCain for a bunch of second-round picks and a 2026 first-round pick, which I guess is going to be like the 30th pick or something. Mm-hmm. And the Lakers, this one was really interesting to me. This reminded me a little of the Celtics. The Lakers pick up Luke Kennard and his shooting, but out goes Troy Vincent. And I just looked at that and I was like, guys, we need defense, guys, don't we? Aren't we going in the wrong direction? Do you have any thoughts on anything in the West or any of those smaller, more rotational moves on some of these? Yes, you're looking at me quizzically. Yes.
Who did the Lakers trade? Gabe Vincent they traded?
Yeah. What did I say?
Gabe? I think you said Troy Vincent.
I say Troy Vincent every time. Yeah. I'm sorry. Troy Vincent's a football player.
Okay. That's why I didn't even have a frame of reference.
Sorry, I do that all the time.
Did you just watch High School Musical? Like you have Troy on top of head? Like I didn't know what was going on there.
No.
Okay, so boots on the ground here, listening to people talk in Minneapolis, right?
Mm-hmm.
People are really excited about Ayo Dosunmu.
What?
Right? They're really excited about him. And I gotta say,
yeah. They just have no depth, the Wolves, so I think it's helpful.
It's helpful. It's also still not addressing the passing point guard concern that I've had about them for like the last 5 years or something like that. Yeah. And I think it was interesting. Like Anthony Edwards played really well in the All-Star game. And it's one of those where I'm like, man, this guy seems like he might be able to coexist when he's around people that can move the ball and take the burden off him and things like that. Now, Ayo's great. He's a speedster. He can finish in the paint. He's a good 3-point shooter. But it also seems like Bones Highland is getting a good amount of run for the Timberwolves as well, right? So, like he had some depth. Dillingham definitely wasn't working out there, and I'm glad he's able to go somewhere else and see if he can rejuvenate what people were excited about with him. But the Ayo trade doesn't really move the needle for me for the Timberwolves.
Do any of the Western teams move the needle for you? Because for me, they don't.
I really like the Jared McCain pickup for the Thunder, but not in terms of what he's going to do this year. I just like in terms of like, hey, here's an interesting guy that looks pretty solid in his rookie season. Maybe we just pick him up. Maybe we just keep him on the back burner and see what kind of developmental stuff we can do. I don't think he's going to crack the rotation when we get to the playoffs or anything like that. I just like the trade going forward.
Okay. I don't know how I feel about that game. That having something that maybe is a little bit more of a solidified product for a first round pick, but that first round pick is going to be at the end of the first round, so maybe it's worth it. I don't have strong opinions about it, but I don't really think any of these moves in the West did too much to change any of the pecking order in the West. Do you have any other final thoughts before we, go to the post show and talk about more fun things?
Well, I guess if we have to do NBA stuff, because every podcast talks about tanking, do you have like a minute? Do you want to say anything about tanking?
Oh my goodness. The tanking discussion. That's right. I have a very simple take on the tanking. I think there should be a committee of integrity for the NBA. I'll be happy to run it. And basically you just evaluate whether teams are, committing some tomfoolery and playing fast and loose with the rules. There are all these rules about reporting injuries and being honest about reporting injuries for obvious reasons. You're supposed to play players. You're supposed to be competitive. You're supposed to give people an advance notice on who's going to be at the game if you buy tickets, stuff like that. And if they're not going to shorten the season, which they have to, they have to shorten the season. That's the obvious solution. But if they're not going to shorten the season and they want to stop this nonsense, we have the committee. And the committee evaluates whether you violated the reporting on injury. Like you can't make up an injury. If you make up an injury and you get caught, then you get your first strike. Your first strike from the committee is a fine and a heavy warning. Your second strike and every subsequent strike after that, you lose a draft position. Mm-hmm. That's it. So you get like a grace period where you could argue we really weren't playing fast and loose with the rules. Fine. You only lose a small amount of money. But on the second one, I would have your draft, wherever you're at, you want to tank, you just go back a position. You did you did it in 2 games, you go back 2 positions, and the rest of the league can celebrate as they move up the draft board at your expense. That's my committee of ethics.
Can we just have a committee of ethics for everything? Does it have to stop at basketball? Can there just be I know we're just getting into the Republic, Plato's out there being this is what I've been talking about for thousands of years, as if he's still talking about it.
Yeah.
No. I just feel like that's a good idea. Let's have some philosopher king somewhere, sit to the side and decide if things are ethical. And honestly, I love what you're saying. My one nitpick is don't even tell people what the consequences are, right? Just be like, we're watching you. right? We're watching you, and if stuff happens, like you
We'll
watch out,
we'll
we'll come in
judge.
swinging.
Yeah, we'll judge based on what we find, basically.
Like, I know if you're the Clippers, you're hanging on being like, oh, it's all just circumstantial evidence. Like at a certain point, you're like, hey, I'm the ethics committee. I can make any decision off of anything. If I have a whim, if I even kind of think something's going on here, we're making a decision, and you can't argue against us, right?
These are stern policies you're talking about, Cody. Stern policies.
Absolutely.
To support us, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. It's the best way to do it. We have a ton of extra content for members, videos for our top tier members, stats boards on players and teams that update throughout the year. Patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. It's also just a great way to directly support all things thinking basketball. Now that we've talked about basketball, do you have other things that you would like to bring up that happened to you this week, or that you enjoyed in life, or that are on the top of your head or the back of your head?
Well, okay, so it's the All-Star weekend. You know, there's not live basketball. There's obviously like countless basketball that could be watched in the past, but last week you talked about materialist. Is it plural? Is it a singular?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't want to go back and look.
Regardless,
I was offended by it.
Is there any other content that you've been consuming in lieu of NBA All-Star Weekend?
Yes.
Not in lieu, that was wrong. In honor of it being NBA All-Star Weekend.
Yes. Well, in honor of it being NBA All-Star Weekend, I went back and I watched a classic game the other night, which I usually never do during the season, but I did on the day off, and that was a lot of fun. But I did watch. So I mentioned The Materialists, and I didn't like it, and I had a lot of problems with it. And then I saw a beautiful movie that I just wanted to shout out. It's not going to be for everyone because it is a very visual film. It is a very much show, don't tell. It's a very subtle film, and it's a very simple film. And that made it feel to me like an older style story from the 1900s. It didn't have all the bells and whistles and glitz and glamour and twists and turns. It didn't need inversions and fake outs and CGIs. It's an Irish film called The Quiet Girl. It came out a couple of years ago. And it's just really, really beautiful film about a young girl who's quiet. Yeah.
Okay. And would you say that the movie itself is quiet in that sort of way? Like if you watch it, don't expect to have like your heart rate elevated or anything else. Just like sit down and watch the construction of this beautiful movie.
Yeah, it is. It plays with silence very well. Absolutely. It definitely plays with silence very well. And it is, like I said, it's a simple story. It's a simple story, and that felt almost old-fashioned. There's no larger, giant commentary or thematic social commentary. There's no New Yorker cartoons coming out about this, about what it really means, or deep YouTube videos about plot twists and things like that. Not that we don't all enjoy a good. I mean, Cody, that's like your bag, right? You like getting in there and creating an entire analysis series on what book are you guys on the Odyssey right now?
We just finished book 12 right now, and we're gonna take a pause and do some quizzes and whatever else on that before moving on. But do you like it when there's not a big thematic thing to dive into with the movie? Like, do you want something like I know Robert Eggers, for instance, the guy that directed The Northman. He did was it Dracula? No, Nosferatu. He did Nosferatu recently. The Witch. Like he almost famously has this whole thing where it's like, I don't necessarily go for big thematic things. I'm just trying to tell some sick, fairy tale type stories, but make them really dark. Do you appreciate that? Do you want more thematic stuff, or are you like, oh, give me both and I'll accept them when they come?
I'd say both. I do probably lean more toward larger thematic ideas because it adds a layer to the storytelling in a sense. Like storytelling is so kind of fundamental to me about sharing ideas, and you get this incredible blend of entertainment and education where you're being incepted with these ideas, and you're like, oh, I mean, think about storytelling to children, right? We tell these stories to children to like give them ideas about how the world works and about principles. What was the fable in this story? That kind of thing. Do they still do that in schools actually?
I mean, I would like to think so. I would like to think
Okay.
that's part of what the Odyssey is and other things that I'm teaching. I teach Animal Farm and Lord of the Flies. I feel like there's some big takeaways that you can have.
Yeah,
from these
no,
kinds of
those are huge ones. But I was sort of more speaking outside of your classroom and more about the general state of the world. One of my friends recently, who's a teacher, told me his school doesn't have a library, and I was just like, "What are you talking about? How can your school not have a library? A school is a place with books, and a book is housed in a library." So, I now I guess anything is on the table for schooling. So that's all I was saying is I think the storytelling to have that extra layer, something I love, but it is nice every once in a while to just have a simple like, hey, here's the dunk contest. That's it. Nothing else going on.
100%. That's how I felt about the Northman when I saw him. Like, this is just sick. Like, I just want to watch Vikings like go for a tale of revenge and things like that. I just, for the first time, I watched 3 Billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri.
I love that movie. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I
I figured you'd be into it.
Oh, that's one of my favorite movies of the century, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, it's like with any of these movies, like we got to go in a second, but you bring up any of these movies, and sometimes it's just a movie that really resonates with me. But I also go, okay, so where are you at in your life? Because you might not like this movie quite as much, right? And I think that's in a sense, the thematic element of films where everyone's going to process and interact with that thematic element based on where they are and what they've experienced. And therefore their perspective is going to be governed by that interaction with or by that experience that dictates that interaction with the movie. So yeah, I'm happy to hear if a thought you have on it, because I absolutely loved it.
Well, actually, I have like a bigger point on what you're saying right now. So like in high school, you go to English, you read the Great Gatsby, and you read some of these other like quote unquote classics and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't always hit students. And the majority of times it doesn't hit students because I think it's almost too early to read.
You're too young. 100%.
Yeah. But the issue is once you leave high school, the majority of these students aren't going to encounter them in any way where somebody can help unpack them. And I think the jump from, and there's nothing against like general adult fiction, like you're reading like, I don't know, what's an example? The Silent Patient or something like that, or The Nightingale or something like that. The jump from that.
I know that book.
Yeah, there we are. to something that would go for like a Pulitzer or National Book Award, it takes a little bit more handholding. It takes a little bit more teaching. So if you miss out on that in high school, you kind of miss the boat unless you really jump into some college level English stuff. So that's the thing that always breaks my heart is some of the stuff that I teach. I'm like, I know this is too early for you. I know this isn't going to hit you, but I hope if like some of the seeds can be planted, you can inform what you're going to be doing intellectually when you revisit some of these bigger themes and whatever else later in your life.
Well, this is why we need to get 8-year-olds back on the farm and start them working young. I think that's the only solution here. Yeah, no, it's hard. It's very tricky. I don't know what the answer is. Thanks for listening all the way on this one. Hope you enjoyed the All-Star Weekend festivities. The basketball's coming back, and hopefully that's exciting. And hope you enjoyed this podcast and that you're having a great day.